WNST on Monday night. I must fully admit that my next guest I had slotted in long before Ryan Shazier took one of the ugliest hits we've seen really in modern football. He is a longtime NFL head team doctor of the San Diego Chargers for 17 years now, practicing in the San Diego area, but you may know him if you're an astute football fan as Pro Football Doc out on Twitter. He is a must-follow there. Also doing some radio at Sirius XM as well as at the San Diego Union Tribune out there. We welcome the Pro Football Doc back onto the program. I had a chance to meet him at the Super Bowl last year. Dr. David Chao joins us from San Diego, where they don't have football anymore, but they still have you, right?
Well, yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, it's San Diego. Why would you leave if you're not the Chargers? For you with the Shazier hit, I mean, look, I'm following you on Twitter for these very reasons. And was that the worst you've seen in a long? I mean, as a fan, and I watch a lot of football, I cover a team, I'm in locker rooms. I haven't seen that one where the legs go limp like that. And I know the early conjecture started right away, and that's always very dangerous, as you know, having been down there on the field. But that was ugly, man.
Yeah, I don't know that I categorize it, and certainly it's a different reaction if you know the player. And so I've had reactions for players before where, you're worried about them and their health. But especially since doing this Pro Football Doc thing from afar for the last couple of years, this probably did give me the biggest visceral reaction of any player that I didn't know in terms of seeing it on TV. And I certainly was worried for him and his family when it first happened. As you saw, when he flipped himself over with his upper body, his lower body and legs sort of just kind of followed behind with inertia. There was no purposeful movement. And for a minute, maybe a second there, his left hand and arm, which was reaching to his back, sort of got trapped behind him, and he sort of had to wiggle that arm out as opposed to sit up. And so it really had me very, very worried. Fortunately, the early news is more optimistic.
Well, and in any case, I mean, you're trying to assess this as a football fan, a football doctor, a guy that was involved in the game at the most intimate levels, and you are sort of diagnosing. That's what you do. I mean, you're the guy on Twitter during the games that is a little bit of an expert in the same way that officials would talk about officiating. It's a very difficult thing for you to do from afar. And I don't want to say ballsy, but certainly from an expert standpoint, I rely on you. And you're right, 98, 99% of the time from what I see, especially when it comes to leg injuries and sort of football-related things that you've seen multiple times.
Well, for 17 years as a team doctor, every Monday morning I would go and look at video just to see what the injuries and how they happened, and I think it really helped learn a lot. I'm certainly not diagnosing because that would imply that I'm treating. I've seen X-rays or MRIs and examined the patient. It's really an impression, and I think there's a big difference between insider information, which would be sources and leaks and trying to find out, versus what I call insider knowledge, knowing the game and how injuries happen. And that's the perspective I try and come from. And I think you're right. As we talked about at the Super Bowl, I would be flattered if I were called the medical Mike Pereira. It kind of is what he does for refereeing, but on an injury side to try and give an insider perspective.
Well, John Harbaugh had a lot of questions after the game on Sunday, after the Achilles rupture of Jimmy Smith. And for, a guy like you, I don't know, I wasn't following you during the game because I'm watching the game, but, everybody in the stadium saw him go down. We've seen him on the injury report. We've seen that has been an agitated part of his body for a period of time. Someone in the crowd asked Harbaugh if that was inevitable. And, of course, Harbaugh, with the stock head coach line, as you know well, I'm not a doctor. Ask a doctor. Well, I'm here to ask you, when guys are struggling like that, and I'm sure you've seen this, some thoughts about that, about playing with an injury that it feels like there's an inevitability to, or certainly a much higher risk of having this kind of a season-ending and career-altering injury.
Well, I thought when I met you, you were younger than that. I thought you were one of the millennials that actually watches with a device in their hand. But I guess you're more of a purist and you just watch the game.
Dude, I'm not a multitasker like that. I can't read and talk at the same time and write and talk. I just can't. So I got to stay focused, even though I still look young, and I do appreciate that compliment, Doc.
As far as the inevitability, it is absolutely true that if you have antecedent Achilles tendonitis or soreness, that especially if you play an explosive position, i.e. cornerback, where you have to change directions on a dime and explode off of cuts, that gives you a higher incidence of Achilles tendon rupture. For example, if your normal incidence is, just throw out a number, less than 1%, your incidence with playing through soreness might be a couple percent. Now, that's not a guarantee that it will rupture, and Jimmy Smith has had this for many weeks. Richard Sherman had it for many weeks. There are many other players in the NFL that have Achilles soreness that have played through that have not ruptured. So it was not a fait accompli if Jimmy Smith played on this that he would end up with a rupture. And that's why, so it wasn't a dangerous risk per se. Of course, the risk is higher when you have that soreness and try to play through.
Doc, there's not going to be many guys that have you on their radio show this year who talk about the guy's Achilles rupture and then the next morning talking about, what the hell, he was going to get suspended anyway because he peed dirty. There's not a lot of that going on either, and I guess there was some point where the team knew he had been popped on the PED thing. Speak to that for me, because I'm the guy that throws my hands up in the air, and as a team doc, as an Ozzie Newsome or a John Harbaugh or anyone relying on Jimmy Smith to be able to play, peeing dirty should be something that never happens, yet it seems to be happening more and more, and guys are getting popped, and I don't know what the deterrent would be, financially, 4 games off. But I would think the hardest thing in the world would be to pee dirty and have to come in there and look at your teammates and look at the doc and look at the coaches and look at everybody and say, well, I can't play because I peed dirty. You were a team doc. I know that they're getting beaten up daily about what they can and cannot take, and yet this still happens, right?
It still does happen, and nobody knows what Jimmy Smith tested positive for. That is a strict secret, punishable by $100,000 fines. There's only one drug officer per team that knows the details, and they're not supposed to tell the head coach or GM or even other team doctors or trainers to a 6-figure penalty. And that's not to say it can't get leaked, but that's not supposed to be. I actually wrote an article at the Union Tribune at ProFootballDoc.com talking about that and talking about the unusual coincidence here. Look, Jimmy Smith literally could have peed positive for excess caffeine. Not to say 1 cup of coffee or 3 is going to make him be positive, but caffeine in high dosages is indeed considered a performance-enhancing drug. A lot of drugs are. The list is voluminous. Yes, there are some players, and I have no idea of Jimmy Smith's actual situation or what he tested positive for, that have taken and knowingly taken illegal substances, I'm sure. But there also are real incidences. Sometimes a dog ate your homework excuse can be true, because the amount of tainted supplements out there is relatively high as 10, 15, sometimes 20% in the general population, because a lot of the products are manufactured at co-packers, and so you have substances that are deemed illegal that are produced right before and right after substances that are deemed legal. So that's why the league has a it's on you rule, and sometimes that is indeed hard for players.
Can it be done to play in the NFL without drinking milkshakes or those kinds of products? Can it be done where literally everything that's going into your body is a whole food, not a processed food in some way? I've never seen it in a baseball. Look, I was in the baseball clubhouses when they were hiding the androstenedione, and guys would come back with 30 pounds of muscle mass on. You saw them in October, you saw them in February, and their forehead grew 3 inches. So, I'm from that era where everybody was popping milkshakes and putting a little canister of this in a drink, or I've never seen a player who doesn't use something like that, or who brags about everything I put in my body is something that looks like a piece of lettuce, or something that looks like a real piece of fruit, or a whole meat.
Well, I think there's no question that there are some players that might be skirting the system that aren't caught, but I think there are many more players that are doing it the right way in terms of trying to do the right thing and eat healthy and not take shortcuts. I think we focus on the negatives and the people who are trying to shortcut, but I think the majority of people are not trying to shortcut, and it's not worth it to them to do that, be it for their body, their families, or just their reputation.
He is Dr. David Chao. He is a must-follow out on Twitter at ProFootballDoc. 17 years, the San Diego Chargers team doc. He's also at San Diego Union Tribune as well as at Sirius XM. He's a wonderful follow. Tens of thousands. Follow him. Get him up to 100,000 if you can. He's at ProFootballDoc. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Compass Point Golf Course in Pasadena. It is the best place to play this fall and winter. Events, craft beers, a great course close to home, just 15 minutes away. CompassPointGolf.com. Also brought to you by our friends at Box Hill Pizzeria. The best crab cakes in Arthur County up in Abingdon can now be shipped anywhere, including San Diego, at BoxHillPizzeria.com. It's really a crab cakery. If you've been there, you know that. Tell Tommy and Chris I need to get some more of that salad dressing with those anchovies down here for the holidays. I'm supremely low. Dr. David Chao is our guest, Pro Football Doc. I want to talk to you about CT. I don't get you on too often, and I'll try to drag you over Super Bowl week, and we can talk some more out in Minneapolis between us freezing. What the hell else we got to do in Minneapolis besides talk? CTE, and where are you satisfied that this is going the right direction from all aspects of the game, and from the medical community, and from the Players Association, and for kids and all of this other stuff at this point?
Well, I think it's headed in the right direction. Am I satisfied? No. I think it's much slower than anyone wants it to be. We're still in our absolute infancy. Look, it wasn't that long ago, within the last year or two, that the norm was, after a concussion, that you're supposed to be in a quiet, dark room and not stimulated. And now it is flipped completely opposite, that you're supposed to have controlled stimulation to exercise your brain, to sort of rehab it after a concussion. That's a pretty basic change. And that was the only treatment we had for concussions, pure rest. And now we're saying that maybe that's not the best. That's how little we know about it. We're learning what we can. Going back 5 years, I don't think 1% of the country knew what CTE was or stood for. And now 90% of the country does. And so, and as a matter of fact, we talk about it so regularly, we just call it CTE. We don't talk about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the full name, because everyone knows about it. It's like an ACL. Everyone talks about an ACL like that's the actual name. Nobody says anterior cruciate ligament. And if you were to compare head injuries to knees, like in the 1950s, we didn't really know what an ACL was. We certainly didn't do surgery on them and get them back on the football field. We called it a trick knee. In the era before MRIs, we didn't know that really what a meniscus was, and we used to just remove them instead of try to save them. So the medical community has come a long way in terms of knee surgeries, but I think there's a long way to go in terms of head injury. Not to get too long-winded here, but right now we call someone who gently gets their head hit on the turf and has symptoms for and sees momentary stars for 2 seconds. We call that a concussion. Meanwhile, someone gets you got jacked and ends up with headaches and blurred vision and loss of balance for 4 to 6 weeks or more, and we call that a concussion. They clearly cannot be the same injury. So there's a lot more to learn about this, and hopefully we can get into more of the prevention side of what's going on and treatment side.
Doc, you've been in San Diego a long time, and I kid you about never leaving San Diego. I always say the worst ride I ever make is the one to the San Diego airport to leave. And I've had family out there for years out in Mission Valley. And tell me about San Diego losing that team and what it feels like there right now. I flew through the airport back in the spring on my way, strangely enough, up to Portland. But even in the airport, they were still selling Charger stuff as I walked through. And I thought to myself, man, I went through that as a 15, 16-year-old kid here in Baltimore when the Colts left. and the Mayflower vans took the team out. I was here, and no one's benefited more from the team coming back than I. We have 30,000 empty seats here from the knee. It's been sort of a little bit of a modern tragedy around here for the football team this year. I don't know how they're going to fix that problem, but San Diego lost its team, and I still haven't come to grips with coming there and knowing that team's never coming back again, especially where it's been positioned up the road where nobody seems to care, even though the team's pretty good right now.
Yeah, the team obviously has made a nice comeback right now. I still, I've always rooted for players rather than logos on the side of helmets. So I'm certainly rooting for Phillip Rivers and Antonio Gates and Corey Leggett, et cetera, the players that I know and consider friends, and the staff and the people that I still know. So from that perspective, I'm still rooting for the people. But, from the perspective of being a San Diego citizen, and you've went through it too, it's not that easy. For me, from a Pro Football Doc perspective, I think in some ways it's easier, better for me to not have the team in town and be more independent in terms of what's going on. But for my 5-year-old son, he still says Chargers now, and whenever he watches football, he still calls them Chargers, whatever team it is. He equates that with football, and I've been hard-pressed to correct him to that. And, I certainly will miss the opportunity to take my son to a local game kind of thing. And I did it once before they left just to get it in, but I'm not sure he's going to remember that long term. And, I think that's what the community really is missing.
It's funny you'd say that, because as much fun as I've had with the Ravens the last 22 years, we've had a couple of parades here, Doc. The thing that I really lament is my dad died in '92, so I never got to go to another football game with my dad. My dad died when the team wasn't here anymore, so I do appreciate that sentiment. Hey, man, I'll get out there for some fish tacos, and if not, we'll eat some Arctic whitefish or something in Minnesota together in a few weeks. Really appreciate the time, appreciate the insights, and, I really do follow and enjoy your work. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
You got it. Dr. David Chao joining us from San Diego. He is Pro Football Doc out on Twitter. You can follow him, longtime Chargers Doc. Just one of the best. That's all I can say. Pro Football Doc out on Twitter, as well as at Sirius XM and the Union Tribune of San Diego. One of my favorite places. If we play in LA, if we play there the first week of the year, I'm not even going to fly. I'm going to fly to San Diego and hang out there 3 days and just drive up in the morning for the game. That's how I feel about San Diego. So there, take that, Chargers, and Phillip Rivers and all of you, and Mr. Spanos. You can find me out at thebuyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox digitally at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where they're going to keep you in shape for $10 a month in 2018. No commitment. Get some inspiration at planetoftriumphs.com. Last but never least, our breaking news service is our best service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Sign up via text at WNST.net, and you'll always be in the know. And, of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you ready for Pittsburgh week. It is the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Maybe I should find a pretty little cafe where they play guitars all night and all day. You can hear them in the back room strumming. I'll do the show from San Diego. That's what I want to do. I'll do a San Diego week if we play in L.A. Good way to start 2018. There are worse places to be. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.